You've been told the story. In the Middle Ages, marriage was forever. One man, one woman, bound by God and the church until death. Divorce? Impossible. Remarriage while your first spouse lived? An unthinkable sin. Sounds pretty locked down, right? Well, let me tell you, if you believe that, you've fallen for one of history's greatest PR campaigns. Because the shocking truth is, medieval people were masters of finding loopholes, secret lives, and sometimes even taking a second spouse while the first was still breathing. And the way the church handled it? Absolutely wild and deeply unfair by today's standards. Let's shatter that myth right now. Imagine 15th century France. We have a couple, Jean Le Gros and Perrette. They were married for just 4 short years, a blink in time, before they simply drifted apart. No dramatic divorce papers, no weeping in court. They just went their separate ways, settled in different villages, and each, unbelievably, found new spouses. Let that sink in for a moment. In a world supposedly dominated by the unshakable sanctity of marriage, people were just moving on. But here's where it gets interesting. Eventually, the long arm of the Roman Catholic Church court officials caught up with them. They discovered that both Jean and Perrette had remarried while their original spouse was still alive. This was a direct, blatant violation of canon law, a huge sin. So, what was the punishment for such a transgression? A year in prison for both of them. Harsh, but seemingly fair, right? Wrong. This is where the story takes a truly unexpected turn, revealing a medieval justice system that will make your jaw drop. Only Jean, the husband, was subjected to the public humiliation of the ladder of the scaffold, basically a medieval walk of shame, right there in front of the local cathedral. Perrette, his equally guilty first wife, she completely dodged that public spectacle. She got the prison time, but none of the crushing public disgrace. And this wasn't an isolated incident. It was part of a pattern that shows us just how bizarre and biased medieval justice could be. Digging through dusty church court records from northern France, a fascinating, almost unbelievable truth emerges. Women investigated for what we now call bigamy were often treated with astonishing leniency compared to men. In many cases, they weren't even prosecuted at all. The vast majority of these bigamous wives simply faced a minor fine, a few paltry coins, and that was that. You could call it a kind of useful misogyny, a strange twist where sexism inadvertently benefited women in the eyes of the law. Why the double standard? The medieval mindset was surprisingly layered. For a man to commit bigamy, it wasn't just a violation of his sacred vows, it was a profound failure of his duties. He was seen as the head of the household, responsible for his own behavior, and even for guiding his wife's morality. Beyond that, by marrying a second woman, he was seen as leading her into adultery, essentially dragging an innocent or less culpable party into sin. He carried the heavy burden of moral responsibility. But if a woman committed bigamy, the narrative shifted dramatically. The common thinking was, well, it wasn't really her fault. Her first husband should have been more vigilant, keeping a better eye on her. And the new man she married? He should have done his homework, checking her background more thoroughly. There was this incredible, almost convenient presumption of female irresponsibility that allowed women to largely escape the harshest penalties. Imagine that. A bizarre form of sexism that, in this specific legal context, actually provided women with a shocking degree of protection from the most severe public punishments. It's a complete inversion of what many might expect from a patriarchal society. Now, you might be asking, why were these courts even bothering with bigamy in the first place? For centuries earlier, many local church courts actually seemed to turn a blind eye. People got remarried, and often nobody made a fuss. But in places like northern France, particularly after the brutal 100 Years' War, things took a sharp turn. The region was devastated, and officials believed they needed to make God happy with them. They saw widespread moral wrongdoing, like bigamy, as an affront to divine order. Prosecuting these sins became a way to try and restore balance, to prove their piety, and hopefully to earn God's favor and bring peace back to their ravaged lands. This wasn't just a local phenomenon for long. Fast forward a century, and bigamy prosecutions were erupting all across Europe, becoming a serious, widespread concern for the church. It became such a headache, in fact, that it directly led to some of the most radical, foundational changes in marriage law that still impact us today. We're talking about the requirements that marriages had to be publicized in advance, those bans read in church, and that a priest absolutely had to preside over the ceremony. These seemingly basic rules, which we now take for granted, were actually desperate attempts by the church to rein in the rampant problem of clandestine marriages, and more critically, widespread bigamy. Before these reforms, the church actually permitted clandestine marriages. Picture this: two people, maybe young lovers, maybe two pragmatic individuals, no parents' consent, no priest, just a simple verbal exchange. I marry you. That's it. You were legally and religiously married forever. No witnesses, no paperwork, just words. It was an absolute mess for tracking marital status, making it incredibly easy for someone to simply walk away and declare themselves single in a new town. But it was the widespread problem of bigamy, not just clandestine unions, that truly forced the church's hand. And the lengths people went to for a second chance at marriage? They were legendary. Take Bertrand, a barrel maker. He simply lied, claiming his first wife had died of the plague. Antoine Bonnard changed his entire name, vanishing into anonymity. My personal favorite? Barthélemy Bouvier, a true medieval trickster who bribed chaplains with cheese, wine, and a gold coin to get his second marriage. And when his abandoned first wife finally caught up to him, he tried to bribe her to pretend she was actually his maid. You literally cannot invent this level of brazenness. Why all this incredible effort, all this risk? Because, despite all the rules and the fear of divine punishment, marriage mattered deeply to these people. By the 15th century, the church was actually promoting marriage as a holy state, a path to becoming a good Christian. So, if you were unhappily married, or if your spouse truly disappeared during one of Europe's many wars or plagues, a new marriage offered far more than just companionship. It was a way to regain legitimacy, to find a place in society, to have a recognized family, and simply to find the kind of stable partnership that almost all humans crave. So, the next time you reflect on medieval life, scrap those simplistic notions of unyielding rules and perfect piety. Remember the daring bigamists, the corrupt chaplains, the bizarre double standards of justice, and the sheer human ingenuity in finding happiness, or at least stability, in a world that tried so hard to control every aspect of their lives. The medieval marriage was not a pretty, simple picture. It was a gritty, complex, and utterly fascinating struggle for connection, legacy, and survival, often played out in the shadows of the law.